Mic check. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah. Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep, should be pretty A-okay.
Awesome.
I found you through a viral thread, by the way, just so you know, in terms of the context of how I even know who you are and what you do, but I'm definitely curious to learn a little bit more because I think Twitter is a pretty interesting platform for people to go viral on.
Yeah, I figure it was the Ace Bright drama a couple days ago, right?
That would be correct, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I tend to have a more conservative outlook when it comes to these things. And conservative in the um reserving my judgment sense, not like in the sense of, things that has been one way should be one way kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah. Cool.
But yeah, I guess like without further ado, let's kick it off with, an intro about yourself, an overview of what you've been up to and what led you to even get involved into the space of both tech and pixel art and kind of go from there.
Cool. So probably about 6 years now I started doing pixel art commissions. It had been a hobby for a long time, and so I figured, hey, I'll make some kind of job out of this. So I started doing freelance, worked for a couple different game development projects, different individuals. Really got a taste for it, enjoyed it a lot. Uh, and then a couple of years ago, I got interested in AI, kind of found it through its early beginnings in something called VQGAN plus Clip, basically the first iteration of the sort of text to image stuff we see now. And so that really inspired me, and I've been learning about it and working on it ever since.
This is interesting. So you would say you're, for lack of a better term, classically trained artist then?
Yeah, yeah, I'd say so. I even went to art school for a couple of years. Um, yeah,
Yeah, I don't see folks like you come along very often. I'll tell you that much. The majority of the folks that take an interest in AI, for the most part, don't have a foundation when it comes to the principles of arts and design and what have you. But I guess a way to branch off from that would have to deal with creativity. Like how would you define that?
as far as creativity goes, honestly, I think it has to originate from, well, I guess you could consider most systems deterministic if you go down to it. But I'd say, something that's so random you can't really get the same result twice. And so I think with people, that's definitely how that works, because we have a mash of different influences, things that change how we view the world around us. And so that's kind of what inspires our individualism and our creativity, is what we've been through, what we've seen, and how we've interpreted it.
I see. Yeah, I think this deterministic factor that you pointed out has somewhat to do with, the concept of entropy. Are you familiar with that?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know, like I find that to be fascinating, this idea that at some point, may not be, in a million years, a billion years, but what has, what will, everything that has ever been made and will ever be made can be made. I think when it comes to creativity, there's only so many permutation of that in terms of, what exists and what we can even like consider enjoyable at that point, right? Because one can argue that, for example, that noise music is creative, but is it enjoyable? I don't know.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I think a lot of things come down to that. You get derivative after derivative of an idea, mixing different things together, and eventually you get just total randomness.
Yeah. So now to veer back into the whole pixel art territory, in terms of pixel art as a movement, how did you see things go back when you first started to get involved and give us a sense of like an overview of how things have evolved? towards modern times, and how do you see this um, creative field going in the future, especially accounting for this AI tool that you're responsible for directly?
Yeah, so as far as pixel art goes, I mean, originally it was because of, software limitations. But by the time I got into it, that clearly wasn't a concern. Um, Nowadays, it's more of for like just the aesthetic of it. Personally, I got into it just because a lot of the games that I enjoyed were in a pixel art style. And so I just sort of picked it up and started learning it because that was the kind of art and entertainment that I liked. Um, and nowadays you see that too. I think a few of the top grossing games from this year actually were pixel art games by indie developers. And so it's still a very, very popular medium and a very popular style. And along with that goes, people looking for ways to make creation faster and make it cheaper. And part of that is where my tool figures in. Now,
Yeah, and apparently it's controversial, and I guess as someone who's, I'm in the creative industries, more specifically animation and music, and I have quite an interest in having tools at my disposal that make either of these processes easier. And based on the feedback that I've seen in response to what you've done so far, you don't have a lot of fans.
you see that's the interesting part. I'm actually a pretty well-respected figure in a very large pixel art community. Actually, the largest pixel art server on Discord. Um, and I have a lot of friends there and a lot of people that enjoy my work and enjoy hanging out with me and talking with me. And so it's been interesting to kind of see that split of, the people who know me and are like, hey, this guy's doing things right versus, the people who kind of just got into it not knowing who I am and not knowing what I've done, because I've been working on this for almost 2 years now. And so, seeing that divide of people who support me because they know me and they know my character, and people who just come in with zero knowledge and think I'm trying to take their jobs. It's been interesting for sure.
It's classic social media groupthink. I would gauge personally. And this is something I became fairly aware of back when the Social Dilemma documentary came out. And how it pointed out that as far as these social media apps are concerned, their only interest is to keep you engaged. They don't care how they keep you engaged. And outrage, as we've all learned, especially in the Western slash American environment, outrage is the name of the game. You know how many times you've seen the headline go viral, and no one really kind of cared to dive deeper past that.
Yeah, absolutely. It gets clicks, it gets people engaged, and that makes more money for the platform. So it's in their best interest.
Yeah. So as far as so obviously you're a professional, and are you at all interested in having, for lack of a better term, debates with people that are naysayers when it comes to what you've done? Or do you kind of having more, well, the tool's already out there, so y'all figure it out kind of stance?
Honestly, it depends. I try to generally be pretty laid back because at the end of the day, you're not going to convince anyone by like yelling at them. If people ask genuinely, I love to give explanations for, why I think what I've done is moral, or a lot of the AI space, what's going on there, what's up with that. Um, but yeah, I'm not opposed to having arguments with people.
Yeah, because like especially here on Twitter, and I've learned the hard way because a lot of my background specifically is adjacent to blockchain, and blockchain alongside with AI are two of these so-called buzzwords that really gets people fired up either for or against. And I'm not exactly interested in engaging in that debate if it's unproductive. Obviously, I think from the standpoint of laying down some foundations in terms of securing the interest or the best interest rather of the people using it, as opposed to corporations. Like now you have my attention. But for the most part, I've heard some pretty ignorant things being said on both sides, just so we're clear, to be
Oh,
honest.
absolutely. Yeah.
From the people that are gung ho about it, saying that this is essentially a free printing money machine, to the people that are against it, saying that it's just going to replace all of the artists. I don't know, man. Like, sounds like a little bit of a reach, if you ask me.
Yeah, I mean, I come at it from a stance of, I've been using tools like this for about 2 years. And so I've had a lot of time to adopt it into my workflow and really see what kind of effect it has. And for me, it's been amazing. It's been one of the most valuable tools I've discovered and created. And that's just because, being a freelance artist, my time is really valuable. And so if I can cut down on how much time it takes me to make a piece of art, that's profit for me. That's that's how I make money. And so using these tools to kind of get that edge and cut down on that time is the whole name of the game. And that's why I made the tool, because, I wanted to improve my own workflow. And then I released it because I wanted others to have that opportunity as well.
Which is interesting, right? Because, like, on one hand, I think based on what I've observed, broadly speaking, when I rely on Twitter as a tool of research, it seems to me that a lot of the sentiment that drives the no AI conversation drives back to, well, this is not made by hand, therefore it has no merit. Or that it's supposed to be this thing that only pieces that are made painstakingly through hours and hours of like iterative process, somehow that's like what real art is. And again, like I'm not so sure that's true, because from a music production standpoint, I know folks that can lay down like a banger of a beat within 15 minutes or less. Um, are these people any less reputable because they've managed to make a beat in that short of a time? And obviously, the purists will come in and tell you that, well, a lot of that conversation has more to deal with, the prestige that an artist has. But even then, Picasso is one of the biggest examples I can think of off the top of my head right now, who famously has said that um, they would charge someone $10,000 for just a scribble on a napkin, not because of its complexity, but because of the years that he spent, putting behind the craft. And my question to you has to deal more with the financial aspect of what art is in this current market, and how do you feel an individual creative, regardless of its field of study, how do you feel like they should charge in terms of like their time, given that AI is going to be such a popular asset to have in your arsenal?
So I think, first of all, there's a huge difference between art as expression and art as like a commercial product. And so art as expression, if you're using AI for that, you're kind of doing it wrong, because then you're having the AI express for you, and that just doesn't work because it doesn't know you. As a commodity, though, saving time is incredibly valuable. As far as like the value of an artist's time, personally, I think it has a lot less to do with the pictures they make and more the experience they have. If you've got an artist who knows what they're doing, who's done it for a while, or has some kind of knowledge or some kind of unique insight, that's going to be a lot more valuable than, just some random artist doing something really common. And so it comes down again to that human aspect of, you have this individual and they have a lot of understanding and a lot of intuition in what they're doing. And obviously you can't replace that with a machine. Not yet, at least.
Right. And this is where a lot of the push and pull comes down to, it's the not yet area that is not quite clear, as far as both in terms of its the timeline, but also its implications. Because I think I've been, broadly speaking, paying attention to the world of tech in general, because as a creative, you sort of have to, given with the social media tools and what have you. But as of 2020, I started to really get interested more specifically about folks that essentially leverage tech in a new way, be it, like Canva, for example, which is a pretty well-known platform where people can get free designs made or pre-made. Um, but also tools like ChatGPT that recently came out and seeing the potential there. And as someone who got to, tinker with both, I can definitely report that the potential is absolutely there. And I think the whole not yet debate comes down to, as far as I'm concerned, it comes down to really what it is that you're using the tool for. Because right now, a lot of the freelancing community that I'm aware of, they're definitely based on Twitter, right? And a lot of these guys, they tend to, and not to single anyone out, but they tend to sort of like put the work out and not exactly do much else in terms of being proactive about securing opportunities for them to gain that experience. And I think a lot of that sense of threat comes down to the fact that a tool that previously did not exist that could compete with their output, right? The amount of work that they're putting out, now will be able to do so. And by proxy, that means that a tool that can put out more material is going to gain more visibility and in turn more revenue. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I think that's completely fair. I think people obviously have reason to be concerned. Um, but I also think that this isn't gonna replace any kind of artist who has been working towards these different commissions, these freelance gigs. I mean, when I started out, it was pretty much word of mouth. I got one client, and then they sent me to someone else, and that client referred me to another guy, and that's just kind of how it went the whole time. I didn't really have much of a presence on social media before a couple years ago, and honestly, I think if people are struggling to get commissions, they're probably not looking in the right places. Work doesn't come to you.
Yeah, we can definitely agree on that. And to be honest, again, to sort of like circle back a little bit to me taking an interest in blockchain, the reason why I took an interest in it to begin with was solely of the fact that I was looking for a way to adjust to the current waves that social media was working, because algorithms, as we all know, is pretty difficult to fight against if you don't know what you're doing. But even then, the odds are pretty stacked against you. So I figured, let me look into blockchain and see how much easier comparatively it would be to secure these opportunities by going around and uh, directly interacting with people that may or may not be interested in the work that I do. And I think that mentality that we're talking about is very prevalent in both the AI and blockchain space, where people are very much go-getters and they don't really do the work and expect someone to find it. They will do the work and then do, or at least like facilitate the process in which someone that may have an interest in finding it, for them to do so. And I feel like AI actually can be very helpful in doing that, because assuming that you use like an assistant like ChatGPT, for example, to outline a Venn diagram of sorts of, what you're good at and what you're bad at, you essentially can hone in on the things that you definitely could invest a little bit more time into getting better at, so that you maximize your potential in terms of growth and revenue and what have you. And the the pushback that I'm seeing against AI overall, to me, it feels strange in two ways. Number one, both in the sense that it's it's used as a usually I hear this argument a lot that um it steals people's works, and it's such a broad thing to say. And I feel like it's for the most part baseless, especially when given the fact that already as is social media is pretty well known for how notorious, like farming accounts do their bidding by essentially collecting tons and tons of works from all over the place and aggregating that work and then getting a following that way, and a lot of the times monetizing that following. And then second, artists, there's a lot of like art and fighting from what I can tell as well. Whereas, say like in the world of tech, like it's competitive, sure, but at the end of the day, these guys are looking at what tools you have that they can then utilize for themselves to get ahead and improve what they're trying to offer. And I feel like the art community, broadly speaking, could benefit a whole bunch from that mentality because I've spoken to a designer and animator from DC Comics who's told me that in his field, honestly, it's not unusual for their peers to engage in this weird game of sabotage where someone who somehow gets an opportunity will lose that opportunity because of, word of mouth or some subtle tactic in which that's designed to prevent them from getting that big spotlight. Then I feel like artists should have a vested interest in having everyone in their field making it, not just a select few.
Yeah, there's definitely a whole lot of infighting that goes on in the art space. Especially in freelance. Um, if there's game dev jobs for big publishers and multiple people are interested in that, it's very common for them to try and sabotage each other. I've been very thankful to have a great community around me and people that actually we try and help each other get jobs. We don't try and sabotage each other or do stuff behind each other's backs. But in the community broadly, there's a lot of that going along, and it's honestly really sad to see.
And on top of that too, I feel like a lot of the conversation that I'm seeing personally in regards to AI art, not for pixel art purposes, but more so the illustration type, right? When that stuff first started to go viral here on Twitter, a lot of the times the sentiment that I've seen is that, oh, someone did this with a couple of prods and look at them gaining tons of retweets or likes, and here I am putting hours into a piece of content and no one cares to interact with it. What's your take on that, and why do you think that is?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes genuinely it is as simple as typing a few words in and getting an image out. I'm of the opinion that that's not what you should do. There should be some kind of human aspect to it. You should take that generation, you should refine it, fix it, make it more in line with your vision of what you were expecting when you typed in those words. But you can't expect everyone to do that. And social media is so full of the kind of instant gratification hype, people just looking for the next thing to give them a hit of dopamine, that kind of randomly generated content works really well. And that's not necessarily a fault of people or AI. It's a fault of the platforms and how they're designed to be addictive.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. And comparatively speaking, um, would you say that the tool that you're responsible for creating has more in common with, say, a 3D software that just imports, assets that are either pre-made or pre-built or even in some capacity generated, as opposed to full-on, um, like generative slash prompt and engineered prompts, and kind of dive into the mechanics of how the tool that you made works.
Yeah, so my tool, it is a full generative model. It accepts pretty much any kind of text you can throw at it, any kind of prompt or whatever. The difference that I kind of tried to build it with is being pixel art. Pixel art is built on a lot of different rules, and obviously it's not going to be able to follow all of those, but it gets as close as it can. And then it's up to the user to take it, that last leg of the journey to a really finished and well-refined piece. I do kind of see it. I've worked with procedural generation a lot, and so it seems a lot like the different kind of random procedural generation you can get, maybe if you're designing a video game or something like that. And so there's a lot of similarities there, but it's definitely a fully capable generative model. So it just accepts what you give it and spits out what it thinks you want.
Yeah. And based on your recent tweets about the response to what's been going on, even though on paper you've had a lot of clapback, you still got quite the support because apparently you've managed to pay off some debts based on the tweets that you've made. Can you conservatively give us like an estimate of like how much you've made since you put that tool out?
Yeah, for sure. I've made a lot of sales from the drama, honestly. You know, a bit of a Streisand effect there. I think in the past 3 days, I've made around $6,000, which is pretty much double the entire earning of the product over the 2 months it's been available. And that's just, that's had a huge impact on me, honestly. And like I said in the tweet, I am just so, so grateful for everyone who's supported me.
And I personally am of the stance that someone like you should be supported because the reason why I even bothered to reach out to you was because not only because of what you've made, but also the way you engage with the conversation around it. As far as I can tell anyway, it didn't really strike me as someone who was solely driven to make something for the thing's sake. You actually had some thought put into it, and given the medium that you work in, I was pretty fascinated by the fact that a pixel artist of all people is what the kind of person that would get into that journey of, okay, I'm just going to embrace AI for what it is and allow it to facilitate my workflow. And clearly that has paid off because you've been at this for almost 2 years now, according to yourself, right?
Yeah, yeah. Got into it 2 years ago. And back then, there really wasn't any kind of like pixel art specific AI. And even now, I think it's pretty much me and like two other projects going on. And so, the landscape is pretty barren as far as really good generative models for pixel art go. But yeah, yeah, I'm definitely not the typical kind of person you'd expect in this space.
Yeah, I think also I've gotten the opportunity to look into what you've done and in the tool itself, and there's this other tool called PicoCAD. I'm not sure if you heard of it already.
Yeah, yeah, I've heard of PicoCat.
Yeah, so my idea was, okay, let's see if realistically someone could put together a library of 3D assets using PicoCAD in conjunction with that tool that you've designed. And I'm happy to report that in like less than 10 minutes, I was able to essentially make a whole library of basic things that you would build into like a room, right? Like let's say like you're building like an isometric room for like a game that's like slice of life type, like with a TV, a shelf, a bed, stuff like that.
Yeah.
These textures were not at all that hard to make, and I'm really impressed, honestly, with the flexibility of that tool in itself. Because what that means essentially is that for anyone who has the know-how anyway, they'll be able to put together pretty elaborate scenes that they can then iterate upon or animate even. I foresee. Like, what's your take as far as like the potential of that tool in terms of people that really push it?
Yeah, I think PicoCAD is awesome, honestly. It has a few limitations to it, kind of trying to fit with that like retro console theme, but it's incredible for getting any kind of 3D pixel artwork done.
And I feel like the the I feel like broadly speaking the low poly community has what I would refer to them as, like it's actually surprisingly big. Um I've seen a lot of people kind of get back more into the retro aesthetic of like a GameCube slash Nintendo 64 kind of like 3D aesthetic. And I personally feel like that kind of personality, that visual personality that games and other formats of entertainment used to have back in the day, like it's long overdue for a comeback. And I think a lot of that has to deal with, the current push for, especially corporations, to really maximize realism over, like style. And I don't know, like, I feel like this tool in particular that you've made, I think it's going to be indirectly responsible for quite a lot of new IPs popping along, and that is quite the feat, if I may say so myself.
Well, thank you, and I certainly hope so. I mean, more people, more creative people who are able to make the things that they imagine is never a bad thing. And I really hope that I can both inspire people to do that and show them how easy it is, honestly.
Yeah. Earlier in the conversation, you mentioned that there was a Discord server that you were a part of. Would you mind plugging that in so I could actually put it to the chat so people that listen to this after the fact can find it?
Yeah, yeah. Hold on, let me see if I can find that for you.
Yeah, thank you. And in the meantime, one aspect that I personally looked into leveraging this tool that you've built was by uh, making it a pair alongside with the 3D software that I've been pretty familiar with. It's called the custom made 3D. Um, and essentially it's a anime generative type 3D software that allows you to make figures and design clothes and all sorts of other things. And I was curious to see if I could put together basically sketches of characters and see what happens when I import those into that pixel art tool. And I'm not at all to my surprise, it handled it perfectly, and it actually gave it like a bit more of a artistic flair, if I dare say. When it took the result output from the 3D software and then put it into the 2D pixel art self concept.
Sorry, still trying to get that link for you here. But yeah, that the 3D to 2D workflow is something that I've been doing for a while now, actually. One of the first pieces of software that I made was a sort of add-on for Blender that takes the 3D renders out of Blender and then composites them into a pixel art style.
Interesting. Yeah. So you definitely know your stuff. As far as later iterations of that tool, if any, do you plan to like tackle some other type of projects, or do you feel like that's gonna be it for you for now?
Honestly, I'm gonna keep trying to make this tool as good as I think it can be, because I don't honestly think it's there yet. I think I can get sprite sheets working. I think I can get tiles better. There's a whole lot of different aspects to pixel art, and I've really only scratched the surface with the current model.
Yeah, I see, makes sense. Yeah, also, when you mentioned earlier that like you were pretty well known in the pixel art community, I looked into, follow quite a lot of them on here actually, and one of them that I noticed follows you is Lux. Um, or this is Lux as they're known on Twitter. Have you had the opportunity to consult them or other peers in your field at all about this tool that you were building? And if so, what was the response and how did they feel about it? And if any, have they given you some insights that you could have used for, the project itself?
Yeah, Lux was actually one of the first other pixel artists I saw kind of standing up for AI generation. She made a whole post about it on her blog and a thread here on Twitter. And so I actually reached out to her pretty early on in the development of my extension, and we've been communicating back and forth ever since.
Okay, that checks out. Yeah, because like they regularly hit the trending page for the pixel art topic, which is a feature that shows up on Twitter that apparently can categorize tweets based on context. So I've definitely been a fan of their work, and by extension your work now, since because of them I've discovered you essentially, because a retweet of theirs is what led me with this whole controversy that this company or software has with you. And I guess just to final note, we're trying to wrap this up around with as far as this company is concerned, like how do you feel about the response to what you've done, and the general sentiment that it drives the community that supports it.
So Asebright has been one of the most important tools in my toolkit for a very long time, and I have a lot of respect for the developer. Honestly, I think kind of what happened was I actually sort of blew up a little bit on Japanese Twitter for a night, and someone responded to that thinking that the extension was made directly by Asebright. And so that kind of pulled Asebright into the whole thing, and they just wanted to make a blanket statement saying they had nothing to do with it. Kind of what happened was they didn't understand what I'm doing or what my tool is really. I don't think they looked into it very long, and they certainly didn't contact me about it before they made the tweet. And so that was a bit difficult to handle, but we managed to message back and forth for a while, and everything's cleared up now. Their basic stance is they just don't want to be involved with AI things at all right now, just because of the uncertainty, how legal things are going to work out with it, and the controversy surrounding it with artists.
Right, because like from what I can tell, and that includes blockchain, Web3, and AI, broadly speaking. From a PR standpoint, it seems to me that there's a lot of pressure in terms of preventing certain companies or certain software tools known for certain features to not incorporate them. Discord notoriously has been slammed on Twitter because of their potential team up with NFT integrated feature or crypto features or something like that. As far as your sentiment towards that aspect, how do you see this push and pull go?
Honestly, as far as like controversial stuff with NFTs and crypto space, it's never been a huge concern for me. Obviously, there are a lot of scams in that area, but there are also a lot of genuine projects and some good people doing some good work. And I think it's always unfair to just plaster a technology as, unhelpful or, a scam entirely.
I see, I see. I'm sure as a pixel artist, you are likely familiar with NC art, if I'm not sure if I'm saying it correctly, ANSI or ASCII art. Like, are you looking into adapting the tools you already built to incorporate the usage of such formats or mediums into the creativity process as well?
Yeah, I've done a little bit with ASCII art. I don't have any plans to incorporate it into my tool, just because it's text based, and that kind of thing is really, really difficult for text to image AIs. Um, I think eventually you'll start seeing products that can do that kind of thing, but I definitely don't have the technical know-how to create them.
Okay, that makes sense. Um, I guess last question I have for you is as far as your creative journey and how you plan to take that forward, because you're already a pretty established professional. You have the know-how and you have the skill set. Are you at all considering leveraging that tool that you've built to, say, release your own projects in terms of, IP, or do you just plan to remain a freelancer and just team up with other people?
Honestly, I really enjoy the freelance life. I like working for myself. I like getting to make my own schedule. And so I definitely plan to keep doing that going forward. There's a few companies that I'm working with, a few people that I'm talking to, business opportunities, all that good stuff. But really, I want to keep doing what I love, and I want to keep making stuff that I think people will enjoy.
Do you feel like folks that leverage these AI tools have the potential to compete at all with the already established, you know, uh, companies such as Disney, Pixar, gaming companies, and so on and so forth in terms of putting out their own IPs?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think, given these new tools and how efficient they can be, barring any like crazy legal stuff, I think companies using them definitely have the ability to get pretty big. Obviously IPs like Disney are built over multiple lifetimes, but I think given enough dedication, people using these tools can definitely get there.
Well, I really appreciate your time and your insight, to be honest, because at this point, I think more people like you, honestly, should be talked about in the mainstream news. I think, honestly, a lot of the time, what happens is it's folks like myself who take the time and I guess energy to look into things and really see what's really going on from the ground up, as opposed to just observing a general wave and just getting some uh, early conclusions from that. So I really appreciate that from you.
Yeah, yeah. I can't thank you enough. It's been great to kind of get to tell my side of the story and how I learned and how I've grown in this space. So thank you for that.
Yeah, and matter of fact, I know that there's a pretty large community here that I'm involved with that is very adjacent to AI and specifically animation and all that sort of good stuff. And they usually host spaces, and I would very much like to extend the invitation towards you in terms of attending some of the larger spaces, because I think someone like you could definitely bring very needed insight in terms of what's being done to the space right now.
Well, thank you. I would definitely appreciate that invite, and I'd love to be involved.
Sounds good. Sounds good. On that note, have a good one. And again, thanks for calling.
Yeah, thank you.
All right.